So today we'll talk about how to transform a negative work situation into a positive one and how to feel less hopeless about your career. It may feel impossible, but it's not. And there's nothing like the feeling when you finally escaped. And I thought, this picture is on my website. It really exemplifies what I hope people will feel when they're able to move, out of a toxic situation. As Emilie mentioned, I'm the Senior Advisor to Workplace Fairness and the President and Principal of PB Work Solutions. My background is as an employment lawyer for over 25 years now. And for the last 15, I've been affiliated with Workplace Fairness, which is a nonprofit organization that provides legal information to workers about their employment rights, primarily through a website, workplacefairness.org. And about a year and a half ago, I started PB Work Solutions, where I've begun to counsel and coach both individuals and organizations, individuals how to get out of toxic workplaces or deal with their situation, and organizations who are interested in better policies and addressing issues in their own workplace. I consider myself a target and a survivor. I don't use the word victim, but I can say me too. I've been in the situation. I've had experiences myself that never should have happened in the workplaces that I was in. And I've been involved in counseling literally thousands of workers throughout the course of my career. Every story is a little bit different, but there's a lot of commonalities. And I'm a pretty regular media commentator on such things as sexual harassment, termination. I'm getting a lot of calls about Amazon and their how they're violating their workers' privacy. But when workplace issues are in the news, I get a lot of calls from the media, and so I've tried to use that platform to assist people as well. One of the most important lessons I've learned in my career is that there's a big gap between the point at which a toxic work situation arises and the point at which you can do something about it from a legal perspective. It may not be a legal case. Your rights may not be protected. You may not be able to find an attorney to litigate for you. You may not want to bring a lawsuit. It can tie up several years of your life. It can be very stressful, very hard on your professional and your personal relationships. And to be honest, I'm not sure that the legal process is really set up to assist the people who've been the most harmed. And I learned this lesson very early in my career with a client I had in my private practice. But there's a power imbalance between the employer and the employee, you in that situation. And if you're litigating, you have to relive the incident over and over. You have to make your life an open book in order to prove that you suffered emotional distress. The trauma that you suffered becomes public. It can affect your career. You can be blackballed. And the perverse thing about litigation is the more that you're harmed, the higher the damages. And so attorneys look for somebody who's been really, really harmed. And, that may not be you, and you don't want it to be you. And to prevent from flooding the courts, by the time you get to the point where you suffer legal damage, due to the strict legal standards, the harm has already happened. And so I want to take a look at how to deal with some common toxic workplace situations without having to litigate, or to help you know when you need to talk to a lawyer to proceed further. And the most common ones that we're going to talk about today that you're most likely to have issues with are harassment and discrimination, bullying, and termination. And those are the most common workplace situations, and we'll talk about some broadly applicable strategies that can work for you. The questions that we'll look at for each one are: is it illegal? Is it fixable? Should I stay or should I go? And I hear the Clash song in my head when I say that. And what are my next steps? How can you pivot from your current situation into a better one? And each has a set of strategies which people in your situation will typically look at. But, each set of facts is different. Each situation is different. So you will have to take your individual situation into account. Start with harassment. The definition of harassment, and I know we've been talking about it a lot lately, everywhere you go in the media is all you see right now, but the definition of harassment is a legal one. It's unwelcome sexual conduct that is a term or condition of employment. And there are typically two types recognized under the law. There's the quid pro quo, and that is when a manager or another authority figure, they explicitly offer, they hint that they will give you something in exchange for your satisfaction of their sexual demand. And that's what we most commonly know as harassment. There's also the hostile work environment, which is conduct that is sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter the conditions of your employment and create an abusive working environment. And that does not have to be coming from a manager or supervisor. It can be one or more coworkers that create that environment in your workplace. Quid pro quo situations are requests for a date, a romantic relationship, a sexual relationship, some kind of participation in their sexual gratification. If it comes from a manager, an owner of the company, a supervisor, the company is liable for that, even if they didn't know about it or it's never happened before. And that's the most common quid pro quo situation. But it can also happen from a coworker, but the company is only liable in that instance when it was reported and they didn't take prompt, effective action to stop the harassment. And it also has to be unwanted, and that's sometimes the defense the company will make in a quid pro quo situation. Or if it was a consensual relationship, it was wanted at the time, but after it ended, you endured harassment in your workplace. In the hostile work environment, some of the types of that include jokes, comments on your appearance, leering, physical gestures, being asked questions about your sex life, pornography or graphic pictures, being forced to listen to sexual conversations. Now, if that's from your coworkers, which is often the situation, the company is only liable. They have to know about it, and they have to take prompt, effective action to stop it. And if they do that, then they won't be legally liable. There are some exceptions to that. If the reporting would be futile, if the person you have to report to is the person who is the cause, or if they don't have a reporting mechanism in place. Other people have reported and they've done nothing, but that's a very limited exception.
Quick question on that, Paula. So if someone sees something like that happen in their own workplace or finds themselves on the receiving end of that kind of unwanted harassment, would you say that their next, I don't want to get ahead of you too if you're about to say this, but that reporting requirement, like how swift does that have to be? How documented does that have to be? Like how should an individual in that circumstance act?
Well, I recommend that you be familiar with your reporting mechanism and your policies in your workplace, and report it as quickly as possible, to the extent you feel comfortable. If it's a one-time incident and never happens again, you may not feel the need to report it. But if it keeps happening and looks like it's moving towards satisfying pervasiveness, then it's definitely something you're going to want to report.
Cool. Thanks.
So the first question, is it illegal? Sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination, and so it will be analyzed under the laws that are applicable to discrimination. There are other forms of harassment. It's not just sexual harassment. That's the one we hear about the most, but people can also be harassed on the basis of their race, their disability, their religion. Those are the most common. It can also be intersectional, so that it could be race and sex or religion and sex. So that's something to always be on the lookout for. They're all analyzed under the same laws. Also illegal and covered under the same laws are retaliation. After you complain about harassment, do you face additional harm, such as being disciplined or fired or denied a promotion? Oops, I went the wrong way. Is it fixable? And here are some of the things that, in terms of fixing it, you may be able to handle it by saying, look, this is offensive, don't do this again. Just, pushing back when it happens. Does that work to stop it? Have you seen or are aware of other people who've been targeted? If you make an informal complaint, if you tell your supervisor about it or you tell HR about it, do they do anything? If you decide to follow the company's policies for formal complaints, does the employer offer you anything in return that is likely to take care of the problem? Is it possible, for example, that a transfer, a change in your work environment, a change in your supervisors, your coworkers, is there somewhere else you can go in the company to get away from your current environment that will make a difference? Because some of that hasn't worked or has been sufficient, that's what we're seeing the rise in Me Too. People speaking out, talking about it on social media, reporting it anonymously without attaching their name to it, sharing information with others, what we call whisper networks, where you tell colleagues in the same industry, hey, this person is a problem. Have you ever experienced anything? And, we've heard about instances where doing that has led to the exposure of people who are serial harassers and predators. If once you report it, is there discrimination that's happening? Have they taken any kind of adverse action against you? Is the company defensive in reply to your accusations, or are they taking it seriously? All of these things go into, these are some ways that you may be able to fix it, and if you do those things, you might, and they don't work, then you might not be able to fix it. The next question, should I stay or should I go? What was your supervisor or your coworker's response to your informal complaints? If you filed a formal complaint, how did the company respond to that? Were you able to transfer or change your work environment in some way? And did that take care of the problem? If you needed a different supervisor, if your supervisor was the one who was the harasser, or particular coworkers, can you get away from those? And does that solve the problem? If after you complained, is your job situation better or is it worse? What does this particular job mean to your career or working for this particular employer? All of those things are things that, should you stay there and try to fix the problem or should you go? But if you let it go until it has an impact on your performance, it's really important to get out before any decline in your performance gives them other reasons to fire you, because they will be looking for some other way. They can say, no, it had nothing to do with the harassment. It had nothing to do with reporting that this happened. It's because, their numbers were down 20%, or they blew a deadline on this big project. So definitely, if you see your performance going downhill or they are looking to document what happened, something you should definitely think about trying to get out of there. What are your next steps? If you've encountered harassment, document. Take down everything as it happens. Make notes to yourself on your cell phone. Take pictures, take video. You should know the laws in your state in terms of not recording anyone, if that would be illegal. But anything you can do to make a record of it at the time. Develop allies in your workplace. Talk to your coworkers, people you can trust. Make sure that other people know about your situation, that you're not suffering in silence. If you're a member of a union or a public or governmental employee, follow the established procedure for filing a complaint. If you are a private employee, familiarize yourself with what the employer's policy is. If they offer trainings, make sure that you learn everything you can about how the company is going to deal with this. I would recommend that before you start a formal process, filing a complaint, that you consult with a lawyer or other professionals in this area, because that's where, as I mentioned, things can get more difficult, and you're creating evidence that can be used against you later. So definitely consult with a professional. If you're going to file with the EEOC or a state anti-discrimination agency, you have either 300 days or 180 days. Depending on your state. I would recommend well before 180 days, you start looking into this and trying to do something about it. Once you have complained, be aware of the possibility of retaliation, complaints, actions they take against you, how they're impacting your personnel record. And honestly, be prepared to move on if you have to. Things can go south in a hurry. Get your resume ready. Start networking. Start saving everything that you can. If you need to make a quick change and the situation declines, start thinking about how you can do that.
I think that's such great advice, Paula. And I just want to make a quick plug that we've got tons of resources for helping you on that coming up too, not only on the Bossed Up blog, but the next 2 webinars that we're hosting, not next Wednesday, but the following 2 Wednesdays, are on refreshing your resume and improving your interviewing skills. And one clarifying question, Paula, for you. Can you just explain what the EEOC is? Because I'm a geek for the EEOC, but not everybody is.
Sure. The EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they are the federal agency that deals with discrimination and harassment in the workplace. And so you have to go to the EEOC before you can bring a lawsuit. But because that implicates your legal rights, I definitely recommend before you go to the EEOC to talk to someone in your area, and before you put anything in writing and file a formal complaint with the government.
Absolutely. And just to clarify also, retaliatory behavior. So if the employer punishes you for reporting, that retaliation in and of itself is also illegal. Is that correct?
That is right. And it's a real good point to mention that even if the underlying harassment or discrimination was found not to be against the law, the retaliation can be. You could file a harassment claim and they could decide, well, this doesn't meet the legal standards for harassment, but they fired you or they removed you from an account and you lost revenue. That is in and of itself is illegal. And there have been a number of cases, especially in the harassment, where because the legal standards for harassment are so strict, you win on the retaliation basis.
Right.
So definitely important to look at the timeline and take down everything they do to you after you report.
So don't just stop documenting after you report. Document well after that point as well. Great.
Yeah, it can be really awkward when you're still working there and a complaint has been filed, and all sorts of strange things can happen. So definitely pay attention to that. We're running out of time to go into a lot of discrimination, but it's relevant to the next section. You're probably familiar with some of the various protected categories under discrimination laws. So I'm just, I've kept this slide up for a little bit so you can look over those, and I'm happy to talk about them further in questions, but discrimination is just a lot more complicated. People often say, I'm being harassed at work. Well, is it sexual harassment? Is it because of your gender? No. Well, is it because of your race or some other category? No. Unfortunately, in that case, being harassed by your supervisor or someone in your workplace may not be illegal. And we call that workplace bullying. And the kinds of behavior that we're talking about, it can include malicious, downright nasty behavior, insults, threats, demeaning comments, profanity, being ostracized from your work or not communicated with, being given the silent treatment, gaslighting, all of those sorts of things. It can be more subtle, withholding information from you that you need to succeed, sabotaging projects you're working on, passive aggressive behavior, giving you contradictory instructions, basically setting you up to fail. All of those can be bullying tactics. First question you ask, is it illegal? Unfortunately, it's generally not illegal. The courts have ruled that the Title VII, the anti-discrimination laws that we just talked about, are not a civility code. Your boss does not have to be nice, kind, or fair to you. If it's to have a legal remedy, it has to be done because of your membership in one of those protected categories. And there's actually something we call the equal opportunity asshole, which is someone who treats everyone poorly. Their gender doesn't matter, their race doesn't matter, sexual orientation, all of the grounds that they treat people, could be treating people due to their membership in a protected category. They just treat everyone that way. And that, believe it or not, is a defense. Some companies do have policies against bullying. So, if you work for a large company and have an employee handbook, you should check that. But unfortunately, the law is not very well developed in that area. And there may be very limited remedies. Is it fixable? Can you talk to your supervisor or HR about it without filing a complaint? Does the company have any policies where you can file a formal complaint against a supervisor or another employee? Same as some of the strategies we were talking about before. Can you transfer? Can you get a new position in the company? It may be difficult to fix it internally because when you have accusations of wrongdoing, people get all defensive about it. And so even bringing it up may make the situation worse. It may not be fixable in that way. Because there's no civility code in the workplace, it may just be part of the workplace culture. It often needs to have a cumulative effect. So one incident, you might not be able to do anything about. It may be considered minor or trivial, and if you complain about it, you're considered just a whiner or complainer. That's how the company views it. In order to really have a good chance of doing much about it, typically you need multiple targets. Is this person bullying multiple people? Or is there something you can point to where this person's behavior has an impact on the bottom line, the financial bottom line, the performance of the company? Because if you don't have that, a lot of companies just don't have much of an incentive to do anything. Should I stay or should I go? If it's not fixable, then, as I mentioned, a lot of the legal remedies are limited. There may not be anything you can do about it legally. What would you need to make you stay, to improve the situation? And is that a realistic goal? If they're not going to fire or transfer that person, or they're not going to let you transfer or work on a different team, is it realistic that the situation is ever going to get better? What is the impact that the bullying is having on your professional life? Is it robbing you of your self-esteem? Are you making mistakes that you wouldn't otherwise make? Has your performance declined? How is it affecting your personal life? Is it carrying over into your personal relationships? Do you come home and not be able to do anything because of the stress that work has put you in? What is the job market like in your industry? Can you move somewhere else relatively easily? What about the market in your geographical area? How's the economy? Is it easy to move, or is it going to be difficult? What is your financial situation? Can you afford a period of not being employed or exploring something else that is a career change? You need to, as we said earlier, get ready to move, even if you're not moving yet. What are your next steps? I say if you are being bullied and you find that it's affecting your life, you need to get out. And when I hear get out, I think of that guy in the Oscars and from the movie Get Out. It's like, get out, get out. Workplace bullying can really have some severe effects on you if you're the person being targeted. They've shown that some of the symptoms that you have are typical to the symptoms we have with domestic violence. It can decrease your morale, interfere with your job performance, and it just causes you to not care. Stop worrying about the quality of your work or bonding with your team. You're going to have a lot more absenteeism. You could end up getting fired just because of the bullying, the impact on you. It can even result in workplace violence. We used to talk about going postal and people who just snap one day. But that's what happens when you let the bullying go on and on and on and don't do anything about it. So really think about how you might be able to get out.
Quick question, Paula. First of all, I wholeheartedly second that advice. And something I get a lot from women who find themselves in this particular kind of situation, and similar to what Tracy just asked in the chat here about her organization, she says, at my organization, the bullying happens from the top down. Unfortunately, even when brought to the board leadership, it's not going to change. So how do we support others in the workplace being affected by this top-down bullying effect? And that's sort of what the conflict is that I hear from a lot of women who come to Bossed Up Boot Camp to transition. They say, how do I save myself and save the sinking ship full of people who I care about at my day job? Because I love my job. I love my coworkers, but my boss is making it impossible for me to stay.
I think the important thing to recognize is you might not be able to do that. You should do everything that you can to support your coworkers and share information. And if it's possible to go as a team to a board, or if there's anyone above the person who's the bully, you should try to do that. But what they're going to do is try to pick people off individually. And so often you have to save, it's like the oxygen mask. You have to save yourself before you can save others.
I totally agree. And it feels almost selfish. I know a lot of people tend to have this sort of survivor feeling when they get out of a toxic workplace, and they feel a sense of survivor guilt over their colleagues who are still there. And while I fully understand where that comes from, it's important to get a little selfish and to make sure that you are taking care of yourself so that you can continue to have the impact you want to have in your career elsewhere. And one other thing to keep in mind, Tracy, other people who are feeling stuck in that workplace might very well be most inspired or most supported by watching you get out. Right? You changing your own life, you not putting up with that behavior sends a message to the other people who are in that office who are saying, okay, Tracy got out, I can get out too. And just keeping those lines of communication open, making sure you're using your personal communication tools, so your personal emails or cell phone numbers to text and keep in touch that way, I think is also critically important.
I think also, sometimes that gets the employer's attention. It becomes a sinking ship. and
Yeah.
they start to lose not just one person, but other people see it's possible to get out, and word is out about this place being a toxic place to work. And
Mm.
then suddenly, all, doors start to open for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Important.
I'll let you get back into it, but we've got a couple other questions for Q&A point in a couple minutes.
Okay, well, the last item we're going to talk about today is termination. And the first question is it illegal? You hear a lot about wrongful termination, but most terminations are not illegal. That employment at will is the default in all states, but Montana, if you work for a private employer. So most terminations, you can be terminated for any reason or no reason, just not an illegal reason. If you're a member of a union or a public employee, you may have a just cause termination standard, and the employer has to go through a process. You have to have due process, or you may have that under an employment contract, but most people do not have that. So again, they're employed at will and can be terminated. Some of the illegal reasons that we have not talked about, other than harassment and discrimination, are union activity, doing the work of organizing, being a union member, being a union official, concerted activity, working with coworkers to improve working conditions, whistleblowing. Whistleblowing can get really complicated. Some of the most common ones are filing a health and safety complaint with OSHA, alleging financial mismanagement under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, defrauding the government under the False Claims Act. This is a very complicated area of the law. Some of these have very short deadlines. OSHA complaint, you have to file something within 30 days if you've been retaliated against. So that is something, if you see yourself in one of these categories, that you should consult with someone right away. Don't sit on it, because it's really complicated to do on your own, and you may blow the deadlines. Is it fixable? If you're fired very suddenly, unexpectedly, for something that you didn't do, a policy you didn't violate, maybe you can come back to them and say, you're wrong, you got it completely wrong, this didn't happen. Company may not be open to that, but sometimes it's just a case of mistaken identity. So do what you can with that. If you're in a disciplinary process, do you think it's possible to comply with those terms and conditions of your discipline, or is that just you being set up to fail? So you need to be very realistic of whether you can go through this disciplinary process and survive that. Is the job a bad fit for you? Nothing against you or them. It just didn't work out. Can you negotiate an exit with them in that circumstance? What has the company done with others in similar situations in terms of what they offer for termination? The most important thing, don't make the situation worse. We all see these things on the internet where, you get revenge, you write this burning letter, or, you post something on social media, or you walk out with a bunch of documents, or you sabotage them in some way. Don't do that. It may feel tempting, it may feel, temporarily good, but, you're going to make your situation worse and really burn yourself with other employers. You have to ask yourself, if you're being terminated, is this even a situation that you would have wanted to turn around? Is it just forcing you to get out when you weren't, forcing yourself to do so? Should I stay or should I go? In this case, you don't have a choice. You have to go. You've been terminated. The one thing you might be able to do is to turn that termination into a resignation. Be aware that may impact your unemployment, your eligibility for unemployment if it's considered a voluntary resignation, but you'll have to weigh whether the money that you would get from unemployment has more value to you in your current situation than having it not having a termination on your record. What are your next steps when you've been terminated? There are a bunch of them, and you may feel really upset and unhappy and unable to move forward, but here are some of the things you really need to think about right away. Filing for unemployment, your eligibility for health insurance, what you're going to do, whether it's use the company's COBRA or go on the exchange, severance, are they offering a severance package, and are you comfortable with the terms and conditions of the severance? Is it going to have a non-disclosure agreement? Something that's come up with some of the harassment cases lately. Make sure that the amount of severance they're offering is sufficient for you to live with the terms and conditions that the agreement imposes on you in terms of speaking out. Some states, you're eligible for a payout of your vacation time. You need to talk with them about references, what the company is going to say, what their policy is about the reason for your departure, and you may be able to negotiate a statement that you both say when you're asked or they're asked why you left that company, exactly what you will say, or who your references will be. You may be able to, if you have problems with one colleague, you may be able to negotiate that a different colleague will be your reference. As Emilie said earlier, in terms of staying in touch with your colleagues who remain, it's really important to get the personal contact information. You may not be allowed to access the work email. You probably won't be. So make sure that you have the information you need in order to get in touch with colleagues. If you use your email for anything personal, which I don't recommend, by the way, make sure, if you know a termination is coming, obviously if they come in and terminate you immediately, there may not be anything you can do about it. But, if you're in a difficult situation, start making sure that you have examples of your work, personal documents, private documents. Make sure to get what you need off of the company email system. That does not apply to confidential documents. Don't do that. Don't take work product that is confidential. At this point, we're going to turn to questions and comments.
Awesome. We have so many great questions here, Paula. I can tell that this audience is chomping at the bit for us to break things down. So I just want to let everybody know that we are going to answer as many questions as we can in the next 15 minutes. And then Paula and I will make ourselves available for more. And your legal questions here, we're not giving, what is the disclaimer here, Paula, on legal advice?
Yeah. We're not able to give legal advice. We're giving legal information.
Right.
So, we can't give advice that's specific to your personal situation, but I am happy to consult with you privately, and I do offer a free 30-minute consultation.
Awesome.
For folks through Bossed Up. So
we can,
anything complicated, let's say for that, but if you have just a general question.
Totally. And a lot of folks are also asking soft skills questions, which are more than welcome. So we have a first really interesting question from Elizabeth, who says, okay, so when you're leaving and you're interviewing elsewhere and you're asked, why are you leaving this past company of yours? Or maybe it's a current employer of yours, or why did you choose to leave? How do you recommend managing those questions without appearing to badmouth the organization? And as a follow-up, someone just asked me this on the Bossed Up podcast. When I'm pivoting from a workplace that I've only been in for 3 months, how do I explain that in the interview process? And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Paula. I have a bunch of thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to not badmouth the company, but I think you can make clear that it just was not a good fit for you. Yeah. Some of it will depend on the facts of your situation. You should not lie. You tell the truth. Be responsive to the question. But there are certainly ways that you can spin it that are not false and are the kind of situations that everybody in the workplace understands.
Yeah.
Many people have lost their jobs. You are not alone in this. So, you know, what it, take, write a list of reasons that you have handy, and then, how can you spin those in a way, like I said, are the kinds of things that everyone has experienced.
And I highly recommend practicing that story that you're crafting. Like, really come up with the narrative, come up with the story and practice it with someone else, so that someone else can say, actually, you sound a bit whiny here, or you're coming off as a high maintenance employee when you say it that way. And then you need someone who's going to be real with you and provide that kind of feedback so you can frame it differently. So let's say you left a toxic workplace after 3 months of working there. I've recently been talking to some folks who are, let's say I don't want to use my personal example, but let's say you're talking to a different digital strategy firm after you left a toxic digital strategy firm. You don't want to make that future employer worried that they're going to piss you off too. So the way you've got to frame it is, I was really misled when it came to what my responsibilities were going to be. Or, when I showed up for work, this wasn't at all what I thought I was getting myself into. Or, I felt like I wasn't given the sort of environment that I needed to succeed in. But keep it future focused. Make sure you're saying, listen, I don't want to badmouth anybody here. Listen, I'm not one to hop from job to job at all. I'm looking for the right fit for the long term. So if you're worried you're going to come across as a flight risk, address that head on by saying, I'm looking for a place where I can make a long-term commitment. And if you're afraid that you're going to be seen as petty, then address that head on and say, listen, I'm not here to gossip about my last employer, but I will tell you that the climate there was not conducive to teamwork and to a real empathic workplace. So sometimes you can come up with taglines that really address the concern you want to allay and then keep it focused on the future. Here's exactly what I'm looking for in my next employer, because I want to make a big commitment and I want to make sure that employer is willing to commit to me as well. Something like that. Practice goes a long way on that. Okay, so we also have a great question here from Amanda. No, sorry. Oh boy, we have so many questions. Oh my goodness, it's blowing up. So what if the former manager is sabotaging you from getting another job? And a related question that came up earlier in the chat, someone said, when I left my toxic workplace, it feels like everybody there turned on me. And I'm not sure I can get a good reference. I feel like they're not even being open to communication with me at all. How do you deal when you feel like you're not only getting bullied at that job, but getting bullied even after you left that job?
That is a tough one. The legal remedies may be pretty limited unless you have some sort of agreement, some sort of severance agreement that they are violating. Like they agreed to say this about your termination and they're saying something else. I would recommend a couple of things. One resource is a reference checking service. We work with one called Allison and Taylor. And they will contact the company, not pretending, they say they're HR, they'll give some HR company's name and ask the company for a reference. So it's one way you can find out exactly what they're saying about you.
Wow. What is it called?
Well, there's several of them, but they're called reference checking services. And the one I recommend is Allison and Taylor. And, again, that's just something where you think they might be saying something, but you don't know exactly what they're saying, or right. The company policy is just to confirm your dates of employment, your job title, and you think they're going above and beyond that. Sure. That's a way to check.
Yeah, Valerie here is saying, what if you're getting blackballed for speaking out and you can't get a letter of reference? And one thing, I would think about is, if you're leaving a truly toxic workplace and the people there are vindictive about your departure, and really trying to continue to cause harm for your career, you've got to find another reference. You've got to find someone who's an ally there, or someone who's not there who can vouch for you. Because oftentimes when you've got to be proactive about explaining that story to your prospective employer in a way that makes sense. So, explaining why this letter of reference is coming in from the head of the PTA that you volunteer with, or from a different part of your life or hobbies or leadership, someone else who can vouch for your skills, even if it's not your past employer. Because sometimes that is going to be tricky, especially with small companies when there's two people who you previously worked with. That's going to be important, is to find a way around that, or find an ally within the company. Maybe it's not your harassing boss, but maybe it's a former colleague or coworker who can vouch for you too. As long as you explain it, I think, to the prospective employer in a way that's focused on the future, that's proactive, that's communicative, but doesn't, you don't need to explain too much, I think is really important. And just to clarify, Paula was just typing in chat here that it's Allison with 2 L's and Taylor, like Taylor Gourmet, where you can find that information. Did you want to add anything to that question about what if you are getting blackballed for speaking out and can't get a reference?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, anything you can do to objectively talk about your success, like copies of your reviews. You can say, I had a perfect review, look at it, and then 2 months later, suddenly my name was Mud.
Right.
I think one positive thing about the time we're in is that people are more willing to listen to, oh, I encountered a harassment situation, or, I was involved in some kind of process that, it's up to you how much you want to talk about it and disclose that information. And you don't want your employer to think that you're going around causing trouble. But people do understand that this stuff is happening, and that's why people get new jobs.
Totally. I love that point. We've got a really tough question here from Amanda that was seconded by Lucy. And this is something I hear of a lot. Amanda writes, I'm currently trying to get myself away from a toxic workplace. It looks like her supervisor is part of that toxic climate. It has taken a great toll on my confidence and productivity. I've spoken with HR and my director, my boss's boss, but I don't see anything changing. I'm struggling with feeling like I'm giving up, like I haven't given the system a chance to work, but I've put up with it for so long, almost 2 years. And in that time, I've made all kinds of efforts to work on my communication with my supervisor, work on my reactions to his behavior. I even went to health coaching, but nothing can change him. And something that Lucy was saying earlier in chat is that she kind of feels like it's her fault. And, how would you advise someone like Amanda or Lucy to move forward in a way that's productive instead of destructive to her own sense of self-confidence?
Think about it this way. If this was one of your friends and they were telling you this about their partner, how would you view that? You would probably be saying, I won't go into the damn savage, the dump the motherfucker already.
Oh, she went there, y'all.
Yeah, I went there. Sorry. But, if you're describing a situation where all of your friends and your romantic partners, anyone in your life, friends and family, are saying, get out of there already. You can't do that. That's what I mean by get out. If you have given it 2 years and nothing has changed, nothing has gotten better, and in the meantime, you're dealing with all sorts of confidence and health issues, I mean, that is the epitome of a toxic situation that you need to get away from. And, the guilt you're feeling, it may be something you explore with a therapist. There are therapists who are, very helpful with workplace situations. I don't know if you have an EAP where you work, but I would recommend talking to someone who can, separate out what the impact this is having on you and the rest of your life, and give you the confidence to move on.
I second that wholeheartedly. And I also think that there's something special about the workplace where we think, unlike a toxic relationship with a partner, we think, this is a meritocracy. So we think if I'm not succeeding, I must be doing something wrong. And when we assume that to be true, we take all the feedback we get as perfectly unbiased, factual feedback that we should listen to and internalize and adjust for. So we're getting this feedback. Maybe it's you're too pushy, you're too bossy, you're not likable enough, you're not warm enough, or maybe it's just, temper your reactions or do this or do that. And in reality, a lot of that feedback is biased because people are biased, because people are imperfect. A lot of that feedback can be coming from a source of someone who's dealing with their own issues and projecting all of that onto you. So if you take that feedback and internalize all of it and say, this is on me to change and improve and work around, without filtering it at all. If you take it all in, you're going to spend your whole life trying to contort into some impossible standard for somebody else. And one of the things I really advocate for, and I'm writing a lot about right now actually, is how we can use a filter for determining what we're going to take in and internalize as opportunities for growth and what we're going to reject and say, actually, that's their feedback and it's not for me. And I refuse to think that I'm not good enough, or I refuse to accept that I'm not reacting in the right way. This person is asking something of me that is not okay. And, that's a lifelong process of figuring out, determining what you're going to use to internalize and self-improve and what you're going to use to reject and decide where your principles are. So just know that the isolation that we experience in the workplace when we're trying to meet someone else's impossible standards can leave you feeling really contorted and detached from who you are as a person. Try to remember that this is not a reflection of your self-worth. This is not who you are. This is what you're doing. This is what you do at work. And talk to someone who sees you for who you are. A loved one, a family member, a partner, a therapist, +1 to that piece of advice, Paula. And really keep in mind that you don't need to take all of that feedback at face value. And get out. So let us help you get out. Let's see. I've got one more. I think we've got time for one more question. I honestly feel like this is such good workplace therapy. Maybe that should be the name of your next endeavor, yeah. Paula. But this is really helpful. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with us here. Let's see. One more question. I think I'm going to take Elizabeth's question, who says, I've successfully received a new job offer and I'm transitioning. I'm burnt out and feel broken from my old job. How do you recommend managing that transition so I can start strong at my new job while still repairing? And related to that is a question that came up earlier of someone saying, this is from Lucy, what do you think about resigning with extended notice? Like, should I give them 4 to 6 weeks, showing that I'm really dedicated to this company? Or does that set me up for an uncomfortable and potentially risky environment?
So I'll answer the last question first. If you resign with extended notice, they do not have to accept it, and so they could terminate you, and you would be eligible for unemployment, or they may keep you up on it, take you up on it, and it could be, like you said, an awkward situation for a while. So I think you need to assess, some of it will depend on your job and what projects and, what is the impact of your leaving going to be on the company, and will they welcome that, or are they ready to have you gone? And, that's a pretty factual determination. In terms of rebounding from resigning and going to the new company, be kind to yourself. All the things that you would do otherwise, going to the spa, taking a vacation, spending time with friends, just be kind to yourself during this time, because the symptoms are real, the toxicity is real, and it is something that you're going to need some time to recover from, and take that seriously.
I highly recommend trying during your negotiation process to negotiate an upfront vacation. And you can sort of pivot it as you're not taking vacation time, you're pushing your start date. So if you can take unpaid vacation, which is not always possible, I know, but if you can take a week off without income for that week, give it to yourself. Even if it's a staycation which I love because my job involves so much travel that whenever I take a vacation, most of the time I do it at home. So if you could just take a week to get yourself some sleep, give yourself some healthy meals, take, some walks and get back on a fitness regimen, take care of yourself for that 1 week before you start, that'll go a long way. And it's not too late to ask to push your start date back. If you've already agreed to something, inquire about it. See, hey, something's come up. Is there any chance we could push my start date back a week? That's all you have to say. And they might go for it. They might not. But it's totally worth asking. But I love that advice, Paula. Thank you so much. We've got more questions here, but we don't have time to answer them all, I'm afraid. I know Paula has such great legal advice and legal information to share with us. And a lot of experience in dealing with sticky workplace situations. So definitely take her up on her offer for a free 30-minute consultation. That offer does not last very long. So get in touch with her in the next week or so you can get on her schedule. And this is your email, yes? pbworksolutions@gmail.com.
Yeah. If you email me there, I'll reply with my calendar program and you can set something up.
Awesome. And Paula, if you don't mind going to the last slide that I just added, I think, at the start of this. Is there one there? The very last slide in there. There is not. Okay. Let me share my screen then. I will, there it is. Perfect. So as a reminder, we at Bossed Up have so many resources. We are lousy with great trainers like Paula here. We've got so much more information coming your way. And if you haven't seen it already, I just launched a new podcast for Bossed Up called Bossed Up. I'm a big fan, if you can't tell already. So make sure you're subscribed in Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be up in Spotify in just a couple weeks. It takes a little bit longer to get up there. But you can see all of our latest episodes at bossedup.org/podcast. We come out with a new episode every single Tuesday, and it's been so fun answering your career conundrum. So if you have a career question that you want us to tackle on the podcast, every week myself and an expert guest break things down in a really efficient way. So definitely call in and leave me a voicemail so we can tackle your question on the air. Part of what makes Bossed Up so encouraging, quite frankly, and something someone said here, this has been so helpful and so affirming. And I'm so glad to hear that, Amanda. That last word you used, affirming, is a huge part of getting bossed up. Isolation breeds burnout. When you feel like you're the only one going through this, it's really hard to get motivated to boss up, to own your power, to get out, as we've said. So know that you do not need to go this alone. You are invited to join our Bossed Up Courage community on Facebook, which you can actually get a link to if you just sign up on the very front page of bossedup.org. And that honestly is like the best place on Facebook, where women are constantly helping one another and we're teaming up to answer your questions there all the time. If you are looking for more of a hands-on immersive training experience, Bossed Up Bootcamp is coming to a city near you very soon. That's our flagship training program, all about how to navigate career transition in a way that leaves you feeling confident and capable and refreshed with a bunch of skills to assert yourself and get what you want out of your career. So join us in New York City next month. We'll be there April 28th and 29th, or we're coming next to Chicago, then to DC, and to Los Angeles later this year. So you can register right now. We have scholarships and flexible payment plans available. Don't let price be a barrier. Get in touch with me if you have any more questions. And thanks everybody for joining. Valerie says, love your podcast. These are important conversations to have. Thank you, Valerie. Marcy says, very informative. Thank you, Emilie and Paula. Looking forward to more thoughtful and inspired webinars and podcasts. Paula, thank you so much for being here, for keeping it real.
My pleasure.
Awesome, everybody. We'll be in your inbox real soon. Take care and have a great rest of your week.